everyone, welcome back to Adherent Apologetics. As always, we're brought to you by you with your support on patreon.com/Adherent Apologetics. Today is the first part of the 3 shows that we're going to be doing, highlighting some Reconstruction, how God's been working through people's lives through theology and apologetics. Today I'm joined by Dean. If you know him on Twitter, he's known by the London Theist. He's come to Christianity in the past 2 years, joining me all the way from London in a lockdown. Dean, welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you, Zach. Thank you for the introduction. And it's great to be on your channel. I've been a long time admirer, so it's a real honor to be here with you. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. It's an honor to have an admirer, I guess. I don't know. But first off, before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty stuff, talk a little bit about like who you are. Obviously you're from London, and unfortunately you're a Tottenham fan, even though you should be like a Liverpool fan. So just give a little bit of an introduction for like people who don't know who this Dean person is. Like, who are you?
Well, for an introduction for like all your Americans who are watching, like Tottenham, London person can never be a Liverpool fan. We have to be either Tottenham, Arsenal, or Chelsea, or West Ham. So I'm Tottenham because I was brought up very close to that area. So yeah, Tottenham and Arsenal are the big rivals. But yeah. My name's Dean Scott. I'm 29. I've been a Christian. I was raised secular. I've been a Christian for about 1.5 years now, just over. And yeah, I work as a facilities manager at a university in Greenwich, where I'm currently living. So southeastern England, London. And yeah, that's a brief introduction.
Yeah, awesome. So what just for people listening, what's going to be going on in this show, in these next few shows, we're just going to be talking about some stories of people who have kind of either grown up atheist, agnostic, or became atheist/agnostics and kind of came to faith, just to kind of highlight Reconstruction and the amazing abilities that have come through apologetics and theology. So Dean, just to start off, you talked about coming from like a non-Christian background. Like, what kind of was like your background like in growing up, like in terms of like religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, and anything else along these lines?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, in the UK for like the past 30, 40 years at least, it's been very secular. It's been tilting that way. And I was raised, like most of my friends, very much secular, very much agnostic/atheist. Mm-hmm. I was more agnostic, but most of my friends were atheist. And it's just you're sort of distanced from religion at very young. You don't, unless you're raised in actually as a Catholic or Protestant Christian in a certain environment with your family, you don't have much contact with it. And my parents were agnostic. My nan on my dad's side was from Northern Ireland Catholic, but we never really spoke about religion or God or anything like that. And yeah, I never attended church for the first 17 years of my life. It was only until in religious education in school as well, you basically learn about every other religion apart from Christianity. It's like it's just information really. I never liked the class. I was into history in school, but yeah, it never an interest for me. Never something I thought on. I never really prayed. Maybe occasionally pray or think about that occasionally, but very rarely. And when I was about 17, my younger brother, who was 15, brought a Bible into the house. Started reading the Bible. My parents and me were sitting in the living room like, what's this? What's going on? Like, he's got a Bible. And we found out he's been influenced by like footballers, and because he was playing football like for Arsenal, unfortunately at the time, like academy level.
Wow.
And he was really good at football when he was young, and he got influenced by like Cristiano Ronaldo, other people who are Christians, and he must have just bought the Bible or something changing him, and he started reading the Bible quite often, and we saw it, and we were just all questioning it, like, what's going on here? And it was really strange over the next few weeks, like a spirit sort of come into the house. We all become so interested, and it was just something was drawing us, kind of, my parents as well as me. And I ended up buying a Bible, and for I suppose 6 months we went to a few churches. We just got really into it, and it's hard to explain when the spirit sort of draws you the first time. Mm-hmm. It was kind of out the blue, apart from him getting the Bible. And yeah, we started having discussions about it. We found on Sky TV, where there's like the God TV channel. So there's people on there like Joel Osteen, Joyce Meyer, TD Jakes, Creflo. They're all the people you see. And Billy Graham, who I still like. There was all that. So we started watching that a bit on TV, and then started going to churches. And we found a church we actually liked quite nearby. And then my brother stopped going to church because he liked reading the Bible, but he was very personal about his faith. And he stayed off it, and me and my parents stayed. Yeah, so overall it's about 6 months, maybe a year overall
How old were you when this was happening, did you say?
Pardon?
I said, how old were you when you said
I
when
was
this was happening?
17.
Okay.
17. So yeah, it was about 12 years ago. And yeah, over that period, I was still in England. There's like a big drinking culture and like pubs and things. I'm not sure if you guys are all aware, but I'm not sure in America everyone goes out anyway to bars and that. But in England, it's very much when you leave school, you go to the pub, and when you leave work, you go to the pub. Sorry, after college and work. And I just got caught up in that. All my friends were doing that. None of my friends at this time were Christian, so it was quite an awkward little period. I was having these things, and then they would sort of question me about, well, you believe Adam and Eve, you believe dinosaurs were on an ark, and where did like they were answering these questions. I didn't have a clue what like any of it really was, because I only just started reading the Bible. I was thinking, oh yeah, that's a point. And even though I was trying to pray to God and feeling Him, I would look back now, I was still being led by the world and the flesh in ways. I was being drawn, and deep down I wanted to still go out. I wanted to like go out to get drunk, watch the football, go out to bars, and just be like what a teenager and what a young 20-year-old sort of is. And eventually I drifted, and we just stopped going to the church. And over years, I suppose it was about a 5-year period, 6-year period, it was just more drifting and just living my life as a young man, enjoying myself. And I still would occasionally pray, but to be honest, it wasn't a real prayer. It was just if I was scared about something or had an exam or something like that, we're not thinking, is there actually a God? And times I'd think that I'd just get confused and I'd have some discussions. But over that period, I just wasn't into it, even though I sensed that was, looking back now, it was the first time the Holy Spirit had come towards me, and it may have been me rejecting it, but He was still there present in my life. And yeah, that was how it really all started. And as I carried on, so I started going through a bit rough spell in life, probably drinking too much, moving around jobs, and then I found a new job in Greenwich. And at that time, I sort of thought, right, I'll get my life together, a bit of motivation. And I remembered people like T.D. Jakes and that. And I was listening to them on YouTube, and they've got quite a lot of motivational stuff, like motivational clips, like to get you going. And it was encouraging me. And then I got into like a law of attraction and things like that. And at the time, I was reading a lot of history, Roman history in particular. So I got led into like Roman Stoicism. And it all sort of linked in, like it went from law of attraction, which I had a real brief period, like positive thinking, things like that, into mindfulness, and then into Roman Stoicism. And that really caught my attention. I started buying books on that, and the Daily Stoic, which was a great like 1 day calendar year meditation, and Marcus Aurelius's meditations. And them things really started to influence me. And it got me in a good place, and I was praying again. It got me in a good place. I met my fiance. I started drinking less, and I just started to have a good year or so with traveling across Europe. I was learning history, studying more and more. And then I started drinking a bit more again. It's like I go through these sort of cycles. And then I was still reading a lot, and Stoicism was still quite a big part of my thing. And I was still listening to people like T.D. Jakes occasionally for motivation. So I still had a bit of a Christian influence coming in. And it wasn't until last May, the one before, so just over about a year and a half ago, that my life, it sort of all started descending. Like I was having a few problems with Alexia, my fiance. We was going through things. I was drinking, going out a bit too much. My uncle died from alcoholism. I had arguments with some friends, and there was just tough times. And I was thinking, previously to that, my nan had died, and a few years before that, and a year before that, and it was just things were going on. And I was thinking, is this the meaning to life? And I'd read a book, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which really influenced me at that time as well, as in the Stoicism phase. And he was talking about how religious people can cope with life stronger in the concentration camps than other people. He noticed that, even though he wasn't too much religious. And yeah, it was just all coming to an end, not an end, sorry, like a head, like my life and things like that. And I just reached out. I thought, you know what, you've been an agnostic this long, you've dabbled with God occasionally, but why don't you just reach out then? Like, reach out, pray. And then I just got down and I started praying. I said, God, Lord, if you're real, just show me a sign. Like, just start showing me the way. Like, I want to change. I want to be a better man. I want to get on the right path. And I picked up my Bible again from my parents and took it back here. And I was reading that bit again. And over the next few months, from like May till July, I just started having a few religious experiences, things which I know deep down were signs from God, and a lot of skeptical dismiss them, I know, but deep down there were the questions I needed answered. And there were certain signs coming up and times when I was really down. And it was a tough period for me, because it was a time when I become a Christian and I, after these religious experiences, and it was a time when I realized, actually, Dan, you haven't been living the right life at all. This isn't what the Bible's saying. I'm reading the Bible now. And I'm saying I'm part of the world. My drunkenness, the way I was living is not in line with God's word. It's not in line with how I should be and the way my morality sort of drawing me now, I feel. And yeah, it was quite hard. I was getting really upset at times, and I'll give you one example of the religious experience. One of these times I was upset and I was at work, and I'd sat I'm like the facilities manager at the office, and I went down to my guys, they'd left, and I had to cover their post before the next guy come in. So I was at their desk, and I was like kneeling in prayer, like leaning against the table in prayer, like a bit down, and saying, Lord, I need more signs, I need your help. And the head librarian at the time, my place is very secular, this university, extremely secular. And the head librarian at the time was the only born again Christian I knew out of thousands of students and staff. And because he spoke about it in the past, I'd heard him talking about it and people saying he was. And at this time, he hardly ever comes into this office, and I'm kneeling and I'm saying, give me a sign. And he puts his hand on my shoulder when I'm still kneeling and says, I'm kneeling over this, and he says, Dean, I need your help. And I just I couldn't believe it. I turned around, I got emotional. I told him what I'd been praying, and I started really crying. And I don't cry too often. And we spoke, and he said about religious experiences that he had when his dad was ill, and what brought him to Christianity from an atheist background. And he's about 60 now. He's been about Christian for about 20 years. And it was just one of them things that I know it could be coincidence, but when there's that many people in the building who are atheist, agnostic, whatever else, and there's the one person I know was a Christian, that just overwhelmed me at one point, and many little experiences like that as well, which pushed me towards Christianity fully.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. There's a little bit of an echo. Do you have like an on in the background or something? Yeah, there we go. It's gone now. Awesome. Thank you so much for just sharing your story. There's a few things I'm curious about as we kind of like just walk through this. First off, you talk about coming from just like a very like just atheist agnostic like household, which is apparently very common in Western Europe, which is interesting because like in America, that's just obviously not the case, at least here. Demographically, we're a lot more religious, at least in our upbringing. Like what was kind of like your view of Christianity, like as maybe just in the beginning and as you like progress through life? Like what did you think Christianity was? Like what did you think of like Christians, like through your time as not being a Christian? Like how did that progress over time?
Yeah, I suppose as a kid up till 17, I'd never thought too much about it, but I thought they seemed like nice people. I thought like I was never an atheist, like anti-theist any time in my life. I never got into a phase like that. Some of my friends currently still are, and they have been the whole time, but it just didn't appeal to me. I could always see a sense of good in them, in Christians and other religious people groups. And so I never could claim to be an atheist or anything like that. But I just viewed them as nice people who are probably wrong, and they're just sticking to that, and they don't understand science. Sometimes I might have thought that when I was younger. But there was never hate or animosity towards them. I suppose as I got older, and when I become 17, that's what I was saying, it was a bit of a cultural shock, because I still had the old thinking like Adam and Eve and trying to square that, and hell and things like that. And when you see preachers in London, when you do normally see like hellfire preachers on the streets, and I walk past, and nobody really likes that sort of preaching, and I never liked that sort of stuff. So my ideas of Christianity were just it seems nice, and people are generally, but I never took it seriously, to be honest, until I was 17, and then I dabbled with it, and then until a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So like in this time, like before you were a Christian, like when you viewed like for example, like the truthfulness of Christianity, was it something that you thought was just obviously like not true, or is it something you're just kind of like more indifferent to, something you never really like thought about, kind of like in this time of atheism, agnosticism, just like in your beliefs? Like what did you think about like the truthfulness of Christianity?
I didn't think too much about it, mostly, to be honest. I just assumed it wasn't, kind of, because when you're raised in this completely secular environment and nobody's talking about friends, family, you just assume naturally it can't be true. It's like a very stubborn sort of mindset, I suppose. And I think a lot of the people in the UK still actually are like this. And I think if you give them like good, if you show them like good philosophers like Ed Fazer and people like that, we can talk about a bit later, Josh Rasmussen, the greats you've had on your show. And yeah, so and then people, if they saw them, they'd be amazed. And yeah, and I've, since I've become a Christian, discovered things like Capturing Christianity, your show, and people like that. It's just opened my eyes more and more and more. And the intellectual side, like Cameron's line, isn't exposing yourself to the intellectual side of Christianity. And I was like, whoa, like this is legit as well. Because there's also, when I become a Christian again through the religious experiences, we can go like this sort of discuss a bit. Like I still had doubts, like can it be squared with rationality and things like that? Because in secular culture, you've got like the rational science worldview, and then you've got the superstitious religious worldview, and it's very much drummed into you from quite a young age. And to have them walls drop down and me be able to see, well, no, it is a rational worldview, and it's something you have to take seriously. And with my religious experience and with looking into the resurrection, reading N.T. Wright's books and things like that, it just, my life just really changed. And it, because I'm someone who, to believe, I can't just go by, oh, I wish this is true. I need some sort of evidence and some sort of, I can't just drop the brains at the door and say like that. It's very embedded in me, like through, I suppose, English culture, like to test things and try and get to the bottom of things like that. Is my sound okay, by the way?
Yeah, your sound's great now. There was a little bit of an echo before, but it's all gone now.
Okay.
Whatever you did, it worked.
I didn't do anything. That was usually.
It was all gone. It's interesting that you bring up just the amount of philosophers like from the Christian persuasion that have come up, because it is really amazing. Like I think we live in this time where there's like this narrative almost where it's like Christianity is dying, and maybe demographically that's true. But when you look at the amount of Christian thinkers like a Josh Rasmussen, Ed Fez, there's just so many, and just so many coming up. I'm a part of a project called the Youth Apologetics Empire, and I'm just like, there's like 15 people that are just like know their stuff, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's just amazing how many people there are that are really on this intellectual side of Christian belief. Before we talk about, like you mentioned like rationality and experience is something super important. I'm curious, you brought up this idea of like Roman Stoicism, I believe, and kind of like experimenting with that. At least for someone like myself, I have really like no idea what Roman Stoicism is. I don't know if it's something like common in like a European like framework, or is it just like what is Roman Stoicism, and like what does it believe, kind of basically, just for people who don't know what it is?
It's like a internal philosophy, kind of. It's like it's not common in the UK. It's quite, I think it's probably more common in America actually in recent times. A lot of the books and authors who I was reading, like the Daily Stoics, they were from America, and all the YouTube things I was watching were from that. And it's kind of, it leads on from the law of attraction in certain ways. You can get dragged that way. And it's just all about your internal, your consciousness and your thoughts, and controlling. Don't let events around you control yourself. You can think the thoughts that don't master your own thoughts, kind of things like that. So it is a bit of mindfulness, is like a modern adaptation kind of as well. And I was just really drawn into it, like controlling my own circumstances and not being drawn in and not letting life get you down. It's very useful actually. It's like quite I'm sure they use it in like a lot of therapy nowadays and things like that, like keeping control of your thoughts and using certain breathing exercises you could do as well. They've adapted that way, like that. So yeah, it's a saying the Romans and the Greeks. So I think it was the Greeks invented it, and then on the like porches, that's where the word Stoicism comes from. They were outdoor philosophers, and it got really big by the time of like first century and things like that. And they tend to think, when we read in history, like St. Paul was quite influenced by it in his philosophical mindset, being a Roman and things like that. So that all tied in quite interestingly. And as I sort of discussed earlier, my main passion was sort of history. Like at school, I wasn't the best kid, but I always had a desire to learn history. And I spent, even from 17 to like 27, I was just really involved in like Roman history, things like that, World War II history, English history, UK history. So Christianity would occasionally pop up in that, which would always interest me. So in terms of Christianity, that probably gave me a setting where I thought, wow, Christianity pops up there. That's quite interesting and things like that. And especially with English history, it's very dominant. up until including the Reformation period and Henry VIII and things like that. So, which I looked quite a lot into.
Mm. I'm curious because you bring up English history. I'm taking a course, and part of it involves English history. We're talking about American constitutional history and just going through like the English tradition of like common law, Magna Carta, and sorts like that. My professor is a great admirer of Oliver Cromwell, one of the leaders of the Glorious Revolution. And from what I understand, it's like either you love him or you hate him, kind of like in the UK. So I'm curious, do you love Oliver Cromwell, or do you hate him, or do you want to opt out and go to the next question?
No, I quite like him. I quite liked a lot of his stuff. It's strange because I'm for the monarchy, and he had our king's head chopped off. So I don't know how that goes. But the king was, he wasn't the best king at the time. He was like divine ruler kings, and he wouldn't listen to anyone. And so Cromwell, he was quite radical. He was a Puritan, and extreme forms like banned Christmas and you don't celebrate anything. You're just very strict. You rip down everything in the church, and it's just a plain church with a Bible, and he was very much down to basics, kind of. But yeah, I would say I like him in ways, but not in others. So I see what he done a lot of good things, I suppose. But
fair enough. And apparently his head is still roaming around somewhere, and only the president of I don't think it's Exeter College, but maybe I'm right there. His head is somewhere, and only he knows where.
He's buried in Cambridge, but he was what happened. They redug up. Charles II regained the throne and had his body exhumed, dug back up, and hung like on Tower Bridge and other places around London, chopped to pieces, and nobody knows what happened to the head apart from maybe someone. So. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, that's your English history lesson in the middle of a conversation. But back to like the apologetic stuff. You were talking about like religious experiences and rationality and like trying to figure out, like, is Christianity true and such. I'm curious, like, what was kind of like the transition, like in your mind, like what you have these experiences and you're also trying to balance like the rationale, these questions like Adam and Eve, who's this Jesus person? What kind of like in that process, what kind of like led you starting to like believe like there actually may be some truth to this Christianity stuff?
I found your channel, Zach, and
I saw all me, not God, all me, just kidding.
No, and also, in all seriousness, if there was channels like yours and Capturing Christianity and things like that really influenced me, because I had another Twitter account, just my name, Dean Scott, and I started following, like looking for apologetics things, because I'd heard of William Lane Craig like years before, and I'd seen his debate with Hitchens, and I thought, yeah, he won, even when I wasn't a Christian. Really, I thought he won that, and so I started looking at him again, and I started really getting obsessed with watching William Lane Craig debates, as like a lot of people do, like just diving in and like reading his blog on Reasonable Faith on the website, which is cool, a load of questions, and a lot of the questions, like Adam and Eve, he touches on. I know he's written a recent book on that, and who's the guy you had on your show? Adam and Eve, the book.
Dr. Joshua Swamidas.
He's brilliant. Yeah. I need to get that book. That's on my list, and I really loved this show with you. That really helped actually, and he was on Capturing Christianity as well with a great show. So I think he was talking to William Lane Craig actually on that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it started really William Lane Craig, and then people like Gary Habermas again, been on your show. Him and the Resurrection, Mike Licona. I come across Inspiring Philosophy, who really influenced me. I like binge watched like a load of his stuff, and I just got hooked really from that time, from I suppose July onwards, onto that, and I just really dived into apologetics. And with my background in history, I started reading history books. Like I dived straight into N.T. Wright's book, I think last September, The Resurrection of the Son of God, which is like a mammoth 800-page history book on the resurrection, and I loved it, and it really changed the way I thought about a lot of things, and that was brilliant. And yeah, I just went through loads of stuff, and a part of it, as it boiled down to your apologetics tournament, I found quite a lot of names of apologists and things like that, and it really influenced me for about a good period. So that was cool.
Well, I'm honored God used me a little bit in your amazing testimony here, Dean. I'm curious, like, at least for me, when I first became like what I'd say a born again Christian, and be like 3-4 years ago now. I don't have the exact date in my mind. There was a moment when I was just in a hammock. I was reading I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which I think is the worst title of a book ever. I always like to bring that in. But it's by Frank Turk and Norman Geisler. I was reading in a hammock, and I had this moment where I was like, I think this Christianity stuff is like actually true. Like I actually believe that like Jesus rose from the dead. Was there like a moment for you, like an aha moment, or was it more of like a progression? Like what was kind of like that moment for you, or lack thereof?
I think it was just when I reached out, it was more through the religious experiences first,
Yeah.
and that aspect, and knowing I felt like God had reached out entirely to me. And some dreams I had, like one of the dreams, religious experiences I had, I was like in the church, the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and I was coming out from like a bird's eye angle coming down, and Jesus come out the tomb, and like literally he was above his tomb, and he come out right before my face, and I opened my eyes in bed, and it felt like a man was literally over me, and it could just be a dream or something, but it just felt so realistic. It was, and I needed it so much at that time, and that was just another one of the things, one of the signs that it was all little religious experiences like that, which, and then I looked up like Braxton Hunter, again another great YouTube channel I was watching, and he was talking about Muslims who have dreams about Jesus and things like that, their testimonies. And so I was like, well, other people dream. It's not just me who has random dreams about like Jesus coming out of the tomb. But so it was more a kind of an accumulation over a few months. But I started calling myself a Christian pretty soon after the first sort of religious experiences, and then I got more and more confident through the apologetics. And over periods reading N.T. Wright and watching William Lane Craig, and progressed over that. And I haven't really explained Alexia, my fiance's like, she's Catholic, but she's like nominal Catholic. She's from France, near Geneva. And she, when I started saying, because we never mentioned God, she never mentioned anything like that. She'd said she went to Catholic school when she was young, but at primary school in France. And then we started talking about it, and she said, yeah, I occasionally pray when I was talking about this. And I was like, can you come to church with me? And so we started attending churches where we live, local, in Greenwich, where I am now, and we was attending Catholic churches, but I didn't get the vibe or the feeling, and I can't explain. There's nothing wrong with it, and she didn't either. And really, we attended some high church Anglican, which I don't know if you know much about the Anglican church, but it's very close to Catholicism, the high church version. And the low church version is very close to Protestantism. And then I remember the church I went to with my parents like 11 years before. I said, let's try that. We drive over and then we go with my parents after. And we went back there as the same pastor, a really nice guy. And it just felt like home. And we've been going to that church since. I've been baptized in there from last September. And it just, I just knew I was home. And just the way he preached certain sermons, there were experiences myself. And I can just touch on another religious experience I had when I was being baptized, actually. So it was a full immersion pool. And just before we were going in, there was 7 of us being baptized. The church was packed. And I was standing there, and they come and say prayers on you, so stand behind. And I don't know if you've ever seen in like them healing videos when people touch their hands and they just drop.
Yeah.
But honestly, he was praying, and the guy had his hand behind me, and I just something was compelling me to drop back, and I had to keep opening my eyes because I would have knocked the guy behind me into the pool, and it could have been a great like YouTube moment if anyone was filming it. But I had to keep opening my eyes, and then I just felt this overwork. Before that, I was nervous when I talked, so I had to do a little speech, and I just felt this overwhelming calmness, and I'd never felt anything like it, and it felt like the Spirit was in me, the Holy Spirit, and that was a magical moment. And being baptized meant just so much to me, and my family were front row, and they'd come to church to see me, even though they're not really Christians. But it was just lovely and a great moment. So.
Yeah. Well, praise God for your story. I'm hearing a little bit of echo again. Can you just mute yourself again for a second? Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, I'll just leave you muted for a second there. I don't know what happened with the echo. But you talk about Christ kind of transforming your life. You brought this up a little bit, like with like how you've changed and just like how you view the world and just like your actions and stuff. But like just I'd be curious if you could just talk a little bit about how like coming from like maybe a non-believing background and kind of like the choices you made and just like becoming a Christian, how that like just kind of like changed how you chose to live your life and how it's kind of like just transformed you in your life. Like what has God been doing in your life?
Yeah, sure. It's completely changed me, to be honest. I don't drink anymore, really. I might have 1 or 2 occasionally, but I have no desire to drink. I don't really want to go out and party or whatever. It's just the desire has changed for me. I want to read. I want to get on and read like theology or philosophy or religion and things like that. I want to pray. I spend my devotions. I've got like a Charles Spurgeon book I read every day, and like a devotional book. I read my Bible daily, and I've just my whole life is sort of transformed by it. I'd started the Twitter thing, London Theist, as like a way where I can get more in contact with more Christians and more learn more from Christians and really smart atheists as well, and just to grow and because where I am and I've become a full Christian, it's distanced me from certain friends in ways, but I've gained a lot of new church friends, which is really nice, and that's why I really miss church when we're locked down and things like that. And yeah, I just my character just seems to change. People have noticed like I seem happier, I seem nicer, they say at work, and I feel better in myself. I feel more. I occasionally have down days when I think about back, and I don't know if it's devil or things playing on my mind for the sins I've had in the past and the way I used to think and the things I've done for my life. So I occasionally get like that, but overall the influence of knowing God loves me and knowing I get to spend eternity with him is just incredible, and I'm truly blessed to be where I am now, and I'm really thankful. So.
Yeah, praise God. I'm curious, a couple more questions here. Obviously you're a lot more interested in like theology and apologetics and like now. I'm curious, like what got you interested in like theology and apologetics after you like became a Christian and like looking at like these big questions and such?
I think it was just my desire to learn and my desire from like a rational sort of background. I wanted to prove that no, this isn't just me. Like I'm sure of these religious experiences, and I'm watching YouTube and seeing all these other people and Christians I talk to have all had these religious experiences. But I want to know rationally as well, can this be justified? Like theism in general, like. So I want to see the best. I went to William Lane Craig, and then I started watching people on your show and Cameron's show, and following them and watching other interviews they've done, and thinking, wow, these people these are real smart people, and they're believing this. And you don't have that background knowledge from an agnostic position. You don't see these people. You would never hear of them in the UK. So it was incredible. Justin Briley, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's over here. He has a great show, which I occasionally listen to as well, and he's done great for the UK. But that's he has like a radio called Premier Christian Radio, which you don't listen to unless you're a Christian, basically, or unless you know about that. And but he does great as well. So I started listening to him more and his guests, and you start to know all the top theologians, and N.T. Wright heavily influenced me and things like that. And once I started to realise how rational it was, it took me on a journey, and through Twitter, through London Theist, I've grown and learned more, and it's been a process. I joined, I think, in April last year, and this year, sorry, and I've just seen, and it's also exposed me to the best side of atheism, like people like Secular Outpost and Real Way Theology, people I follow, because I respect them, and I want to see them and people like they listen to, like Graham Opie and things like. I want to see the best of it, and I don't want to just be. Because when I first joined, the things I saw straight away, as you do, like Atheist Republic and Atheist Forum, things like that, I thought, whoa, look at these guys. And then I'm responding to everything. I'm like, no, there's occasionally you still do joke, like respond to them, like, look at these people. But overall, it's helped me grow out of, and I realised that new atheism phase, which I thought was like the peak of atheism, is actually, that's dying out. There's a lot of online troll atheists who still hold to that. But for the most part, like the intellectual atheism's growing a little bit more. And I think that's a lot to do with how strong the philosophy of religion side is, and philosophy of mind side, like Ed Fazer and people like that who have upped the levels, and Richard Swinburne, of course, and people like these. They've once I started learning about them, you just see how much there is in competition. I think atheists are realising that a lot of them have realised for a while, of course, as well. But they need to up the game in ways. And so it's a fascinating time. And like you said, you're young guys, like you invoking theism, inspiring Christianity, and things like that. There's loads of young guys who are real smart, and I'm just learning from everyone, which is great.
It's an amazing time to be alive, just in terms of the transformation that we have in knowledge, and such. It is really so amazing. I'm just thinking, like, in philosophy of religion, just the progress we're making towards theism. I've been talking with philosophers, and I've just noticed, like 50 years ago, the idea of there being like a first cause or something like that was very extraordinary. Most people wouldn't accept that, but a lot more people are starting to accept this idea of like a first cause. And I think we're progressing to where we're going to get to primarily towards the gap problem. And I think we're eventually just going to end up with most people either being like theists or deists. Lots of young guys like Kyle Allander. I don't know if you know who Kyle is. Christian Idealism. He's a genius. The principle of simple unification, which he came on like a week ago to talk about, could be really powerful evidence for God and such. So I just wanted to highlight on that. There's so many amazing people in the philosophy of religion realm. But Dean, I have one more question to you, and then we'll open up for some Q&A. I saw some questions in the live chat, so if you want to like go after Dean, I encourage you, for him being a Tottenham fan, please blast him, and we'll have him respond about why he can root for such a poor team this year. But what, like, you talk about like spiritual experiences being a large part of your journey. I think two things can be said. One, maybe a skeptic would say, hey, that's more of like an emotional conversion. That's not actually like evidence or facts or anything like that. And then two, like for the person that's like maybe doubting, but it's like, I want these experiences, but I don't know how to have them. Like, obviously you're not like a pastor or theologian, but kind of like, what would you respond in terms of that terms with those two questions?
Yeah, in terms of the skeptics' view, that's what I said when I looked into the rationality of it, and is there good arguments for religious experience and things like that. And I was looking into it. There's so many people, like billions of people on earth, who have had religious experience, who feel a religious desire. Like C.S. Lewis says, the argument from desire. Like, if your desires can't be satisfied on this earth, there's something outside of it which is dragging you. And there's so many people have that. Even in secular countries like UK, there's still this sense of like a supernatural. People will talk about laws of attraction, positive thinking, or I'll say this, or there's still like a sense they're saying, oh, there's heaven. You'd hear that sometimes. People say there's heaven, like in the UK, and they're like, well, if you're agnostic, how does that make sense? So if you're not even really sure of God and things like that. So I just think the religious experience thing, even though you can say it's emotional or it's deep emotional needs, but it seems like, so why is it coming when you're expecting it, and are you just that desperate to look into it maybe, and is everyone on earth that desperate to reach it? But that desperation maybe is a desire showing a natural inclination towards God, which is inside of all of us, and which is even if it's through like evolutionary processes, whatever the skeptic might say, there's a desire which is not just survival, things like that. We aim higher onto an end like teleology and a teleological end and things like that. And sorry, what was the second point of the
just for someone that's like wondering, I don't think you have to mute anymore. I don't know, whatever it was, but it stopped again. It was just kind of like for someone that's like questioning, like how can I have these religious experiences, or like I'm a skeptic, but why I've prayed, I've done it, but I've never like had an experience like that. I know you're not like a theologian, like what would you say to someone who's maybe wrestling with that?
First of all, I'd say it's okay, like, not to have it. There's many Christian apologists and Christian things who have said, like, I think Jonathan McClatchy and things like that, I've heard him say he's never had a religious experience, but he completely believes through the evidence and things like that. So there is a rational route to it as well. I would also say keep praying. Put yourself in certain things. Like have you heard of Craig Reed? Another YouTuber, Christian, and I've heard him talking. He has like great things. He said if you put yourself in the same experience he'll get, and he guarantees you will feel a religious experience. So there's certain things, certain churches that can amp that up, and certain things. So I just think that the religious experience argument is really strong in my opinion, because I've had a subjective personal thing, but I've also noticed objective people because of the amount that have had it. But it's nothing to panic about if you haven't. There's still plenty of time, and keep praying and try that if you want to reach, and I'm sure he will show his way.
Yeah, it's a powerful argument. It's even in the Blackwell Companion for Natural Theology,
Cool.
which is like one of the premier textbooks for Christian theism. So there's definitely some legs to it. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A here.
The programmer.
The programmer says, how much have you read in philosophy and theology? And if the answer doesn't include John Calvin, then I think you'd be a heretic then, right?
I've got John Calvin's The Institute, which I put a picture of my bookcase up the other day on Twitter, and people were commenting, and that's one of the books I'm reading through at the moment. So I'm trying to get more into the theology. I've read quite a bit of Ed Fazer recently. I read The Last Superstition, The Five Proofs of God's Existence, which really blew my mind, and I love them. I've read On God, William Lane Craig. I've read quite a bit of philosophy on that. I've read N.T. Wright, Mike Licona. I've read, so in terms of the theology and philosophy, I've read quite a bit. I've read Richard Swinburne on the Son of God PDF. So I've read quite a few. I've got loads to read. I've got a massive list. I read C.S. Lewis, a few of his Problem of Pain, things like that, which I really enjoyed. I'm reading Bolcom, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, which is a brilliant book. Really enjoying that. So I'm trying to mix it up. Like I don't want to just. Philosophy is quite hard for me. I'm really enjoying it, but I'm a right amateur at it. And I even say in my London Theist, I'm like amateur of history, philosophy, and theology. But I'm quite a lot better in history. So I tend to read like Dominion, Tom Holland's really great book. And I tend to steer towards history, but I'm now reading quite a lot of philosophy and theology as it really strengthens my faith. And these great philosophers, you've got to use them, and all these great defenders of theism.
Yeah, it's amazing how many books there are to read. Like I think I found Goodreads a few months ago, maybe like 3 or 4 now, and I already have like 800 books on my to read list. So there's so much literature out there. Cynthia, Finding Truth, shout out to Finding Truth, great YouTube channel there, says, what is your favorite argument for God and why?
Hi, Sandy. Thank you for the question. I'd say personally, it's my religious experiences. I'd say intellectually, I really like Ed Fizer's stuff, like the Aristotelian proof for God, like a potential and actuality. So instead of like a lineal time regress, which I know people like Just Rasmussen and that are working on at the moment, and Rob Coons and things like that, with the Grim Reaper paradox, which is great arguments and in replies to Kalam cosmological. But you've got like a hierarchical sense of events. So what is causing everything to be in existence at this moment, instead of not saying what caused me, like my mum, and then it goes back like that. Like right now in this second, you would go, like say that light bulb, it's got the chain, then it's got the ceiling, then it goes down, then it's got the foundation, then it's got the ground, and then you base it all the way down to what is causing that being held at this very moment, and the base level is the purely actual existence. So I haven't explained it great, but it's basically really strong argument from Ed Fizer and other Thomists, but really push it quite hard, and I find it really convincing. I also still like the Kalam and things like that, the linear one, which other Christians push, like Rob Coons and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, just very briefly on causal finitism and like Rob Coons and Josh Rasmussen. I think there's really compelling arguments for like a first cause, but it's amazing. A lot of the theist philosophers are also saying even if there wasn't a first cause, which they'd all say they do, they're finding ways that you can make strong arguments for God even without a first cause, like principle of simplification, contingency arguments, even though they would agree there is a first cause, which is really interesting. I think there's no more questions, but I have a question for you. I don't get to talk a lot with English football fans. I'm stuck here in America where everyone's kind of like, they're more into the American football. But I'm curious what your Premier League top 4 prediction is going to be for this upcoming season. Maybe give me a bottom 3. I have Liverpool, Leicester 2, City 3, and Chelsea 4. Am I crazy? What do you think?
You're okay. I think Liverpool are going to win it again. So that would be good news for you being a Liverpool fan. I think it'll go Liverpool, Man City, Tottenham, and then Chelsea. I think that's a solid one.
What is Tottenham? They're in like 12th place or something right now, I'm pretty sure.
Tottenham are second. We're second in the league. We're doing very well.
Who am I to say that I'm an English football fan? Oh my gosh.
And 2 years ago, we were in the Champions League final against Liverpool, which we lost. So we've done well. We've done well.
Who's your bottom 3 then? I mean, apparently I don't even know where Tottenham's placed, but I do believe that the bottom 3 you'll have probably like West Brom and Fulham, and I think maybe a Burnley. I don't know. What do you think?
I think them 2 and West Brom, Fulham, and it's out of Burnley or Sheffield United for the 3rd relegation. So on your point, you mentioned about sorry, I just added in my boy. You said about the contingency. Well, you don't need a first cause. It's very Thomas Aquinas influence, because he was very big. Like in the medieval times, they didn't, like from Aristotle onwards, they didn't think that there was a start. They thought the universe was eternal, but Aquinas' arguments still were hierarchical, things like that. So, and that is heavily influences like arguments like that. So we've got both the hierarchical and the infinite regress. So that's two really strong arguments. So.
Yeah, there's some really good arguments for God. It's amazing how much it's amazing how many arguments that are out there. Like I think at least when I first was saw apologetics for the first time, I was like, oh, you got like a cosmological. There's actually like at least 3 completely different cosmological arguments. But I was like, there's the one cosmological, you have like one design, you have an argument against evolution and maybe fine tuning, and that's like your 4 arguments for the existence of and morality. But it's amazing how many arguments there actually are for the existence of God.
I think consciousness is a strong argument as well.
Yeah.
And even abstract objects like mathematics and things like that. William Lane Craig and Pfizer are both pushing that recently. So there's just loads. And there's actually the book, is it 2 dozen arguments for God? Is it like the Alvin Plantinga project last year that loads of philosophers wrote in that? So really interesting, loads of arguments. So.
Yeah. I just finished Fezer's chapter in 5 proofs. I believe it was yesterday, on like an argument from abstract objects, which is really interesting. And it's interesting. Consciousness. I'm just bringing this up because you brought this up. Josh Rasmussen, a champion of the contingency argument, is probably one of the best defenders, if not the best defender today. He thinks the argument from consciousness is more powerful.
Wow.
I believe he said, for the existence of God. And it's really, when you think about it, it's a really good argument.
I know people like Secular Outpost, the atheist, on Twitter. He always pushes. He says that's a good argument for theism, and he's got his own little thing. I was like, well, that's respectful that like a top atheist can admit that there's certain things that favour theism, and they see consciousness as definitely favouring theism, which is great. So.
Kind of along with the same line, Spartan Theology says, what's a theological topic / position either of us have recently changed our mind about recently?
Do you want me to go first and then you say?
Go ahead. I have to think about this because I have all the answers and I can't be wrong. So I have to kind of make something up here, but you go ahead.
I think hell, the doctrine of hell, because when I first became a Christian, like from that May onwards, it was something that was always bugging me. William Lane Craig's answers to it, like it just didn't sit right with me entirely. Eternal conscious torment. And I didn't realize there was other options. And then I started really looking to a guy called Phil, who I spoke to the other week on YouTube, and I've been speaking on Twitter for months. And he's called the Hell Project, and he was talking about annihilationism and conditionalism, and showing me all these biblical passages, like even in the most famous John 3:16, whoever believes me shall not perish, and things like that. Certain wordings all throughout the New Testament that point directly towards annihilationism and away from the eternal conscious torment. So I just really see that as my view of God and how loving he is. I could see that, and I know you've had universalists on the channel, Rasmussen and others who have spoke about that, and I think that's a viable option. I'd love that to be true. I'm not there yet, and I'd love it to be, but I think biblically I'm more in a conditionalism camp. And someone's told me recently that Bart Ehrman seems to think the New Testament points towards a conditionalism understanding of hell, which I'm sure you're aware of the topic, but if anyone who doesn't know, it's like an annihilation. Like those who are not raised with Christ into the new heaven and earth will be annihilated and wiped out. They won't be eternally in torment, which doesn't sit. It's hard for me to take that part of Christianity, but it could be true. But yeah, I lean towards conditionalism. So that you go, Zach.
No. That's great. I do want to clarify. Josh Rasmussen, he would hold to universal reconciliation, not universalism.
Okay.
So I'd encourage everyone. I did an interview with Josh to talk about it. He also wrote a book, him and his wife, When Heaven Invades Hell, that described it a lot better than I would here. But universalism would say, typically, obviously every person is different. You need to talk to them to understand what they believe. That like there's all different roads to God. You can be a Muslim, a Hindu, whatever. And Josh would affirm that it's only through Christianity, but he would believe in like a form of reconciliation, probably after death, was what Josh would say. But in terms of like what I've changed my mind on, I read Nick Quint's book on entire sanctification, the perfection of our faithful wills, and I'm not convinced of the entire sanctificationist position, but I'm definitely considering it a lot more. So that's a theological topic I was talking with my roommate with today, even. So something I'm working through. Callum asked a really important question. How can you on earth think that Tottenham is going to do better than Chelsea? Like, honestly.
Listen, we've got Harry Kane, we've got Son, we've got Gareth Bale back. So Chelsea, we've got Jose on charge. Chelsea's greatest ever manager. So
I mean, I got 2 words: Christian Pulisic. He's always hurt though, so he's kind of a bummer. Best football in the world. I feel like we had an exchange about this.
You
recently.
don't want to start this. It's Cristiano Ronaldo, and it always has been. He's the greatest of all time. I've got his book. I idolize him kind of. So.
I say Messi, but that's going to be a conversation for another day. Callum S also says Hakeem Ziyech's left foot, therefore there is a God. London Theist.
He's a great footballer, Ziyech. He was at Ajax before that, and he played against us in the Champions League a couple of years ago. He's really good. So Chelsea have got some great players, just no Harry Kane. So
how could you root for a team that broke Ajax, I don't know how to pronounce them, heart like that a few years ago in the Champions League? That was
I was in tears celebrating.
That was brutal. Oh my gosh, that was brutal. For those of you guys who are like, what are they talking about? Can you start talking about like theology instead of like soccer?
Do we have any English people in the chat, or is it just all?
That was one of the more painful experiences of my life, just seeing their reactions. Really important question here from John Depew, who says, what's y'all's advice for a young Christian who may be struggling with their trust in God and feel a sense of guilt for doubting? That's a really good question. Do you want to go first or second, Dean? I'll give you the option.
I'll go second this time. I went first.
I mean, I would say it's okay to doubt. Like, I think that I'd be curious, like, we'd ask this person, like, maybe like, why do you feel this sense of guilt for doubting? Because I think when you look through the Bible, I think it's very clear that it's okay to doubt. I mean, if like it's bad to doubt, I mean, just about every single figure in the Bible that you read struggles with doubts, whether you go to like a Peter or a Thomas, or I just think like just go through the Psalms. Like I read the Psalms all the time, and you can see that doubting is very real. Psalms 22 is a great example where it talks about like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from me? Things like that. So I think doubt is very normal and it's very biblical. So I do think it's important to find like a biblical way of handling doubt. That's a really good question, John. So thank you.
Yeah, that was great, Zach. I said something very similar, and I think Jesus says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." And Jesus, by saying He's the truth, it means it's like a way you need. He will understand you trying to search for that truth and doubting certain things and changing your mind on certain topics like universalism or additionalism or should women be pastors, things like that. There's certain topics which we should doubt, and even God's own existence you should wrestle with. Hard topics like another thing that's really struggled with me, like animal suffering and believing in evolution. And I said to Zach, I thanked him for having Caleb on the show the other day. It was brilliant. It was like to tackle such a tough. I haven't heard people talk about such a tough thing, and his theodicy really draws it home. So I'd really recommend anyone to listen to that. And there's real difficult questions out there, and we got to just keep trying to fight. But there's real difficult questions from atheists and every worldview is battling, and I feel Christianity is the truth, and I would keep striving to try and there's no guilt in doubting, isn't it?
There is no guilt and doubt as long as we handle it in a healthy way that honors God. Callum says you guys should do a hangout to watch the Champions League. I feel like we're like 3 weeks away from the next match day though. So
yeah, it's a couple of international break now, so
we're gonna have to wait a few years maybe though to watch Tottenham play. So you know.
Oh, just because we're out of it.
Hey, you're in the Europa League, I think.
I'd love to win that. Yeah.
So like that counts for something. Last question here. We'll kind of head off in this direction. How can we follow you, Dean, in the London Theist and what you got going on?
I only do Twitter. This is like my third ever YouTube thing. I'm not. I'm just happy to do Twitter and learn off like all the philosophers and Christian theologians and your channel, Zach, and Cameron's, everything like that. So I just, it'll be great if any more people could follow me on Twitter on London Theist. I post like nice verses I see from theology or philosophy. I talk to quite a few people on there. So it's great. I enjoy Twitter, but I don't really do much social media or things like that other than that. But yeah.
Yeah, well, Dean, thank you so much. Is there any kind of like last thoughts, things you didn't gonna say that you want to bring up before we head out here?
No, I don't think there's much, Zach. I really thank you for having me. And I'm really excited you got Elephant Philosophy coming up this Friday. It should be fun. His channel's really good, and he's like come out of nowhere, it seems, and he's like really really smart man. So I'll be really interested to see him on your channel.
Mhm.
And yeah, thank you very much for this tech, and I hope some people enjoyed it. And I'm not a professional by any means, but I just love studying things like that and learning and growing in the spirit. And hopefully, it blesses someone for us having this conversation. That would be
Yeah.
ideal. And my Twitter page hopefully blesses some people. So I'm really
Mm.
thankful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Dean, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story and just being transparent on your journey to Christianity. I encourage everyone, if you're not a Christian, maybe today's the day your journey begins or comes to an end in Christianity. But as always, I hope you enjoyed Adherent Apologetics. As always, I keep saying as always a lot. I don't know why. But if you're new here, I encourage you. You can subscribe, whether you're listening via YouTube or a podcast. You can leave us a like, a review. All that helps. And if you enjoy the show, you can support the show at patreon.com/Adherent Apologetics. I need to calculate the numbers again, but right now I think we're about 80-ish% funded. So I really appreciate everyone's support. You can support us for $1, $2, $5 a month. Anything helps. Dean, once again, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a good evening and stay safe during your lockdown again in the UK.
Thank you very much, Zach. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your kind words and a great interview. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. God bless.